good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, all of you. And thank you really for joining us today. It's a very important meeting that we're having. My name is Shukri Ahmed. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Emergencies and Resilience here at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. I hope you can hear me well, all of you. If there are any technical problems that you are having, please write in the chat box, and the Zoom technician would be able to assist you. So, welcome to this independent dialogue, co-convened by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, World Farmers Organization, WFO, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. And as you can see, it is entitled Our Food Systems at Risk, Scaling Up Resilient Agri-Food Production. So as you can see already, risk and resilience, the two are more or less go together in this dialogue that we're having. This independent dialogue seeks to contribute to the United Nations Food System Summit and calls on farmers and DRR, disaster risk management practitioners, to share their insights on practices, challenges, and opportunities of managing multiple risks to build resilient agri-food systems. The dialogue process seeks to support participation to the UN Food System Summit to be held in September in New York, with a pre-summit at the FAO headquarters in Rome from July 26th, next Monday, to July 28th. So far, 769 independent dialogues were announced on the Summit Dialogue Gateway. So this is also one of them. Let me quickly go through a few housekeeping items for all of us. The dialogue will last about 2 hours and is being recorded. The outcomes from this independent dialogue will contribute to the UN 2021 Food System Summit by publishing the official feedback on the Summit Dialogue Gateway. We'll be sharing the resources from the dialogue on the UN Food System Summit Dialogues Gateway, as well as on the dedicated page on the knowledge sharing platform Resilience Core. And the link to this page would be given to you in the chat box. Please keep your microphone silent to avoid interruptions, and please put your country and institution before your name so that you may rename yourself actually in the Zoom by going to participants, find your name at the top of the list and selecting the rename. So today we have a very exciting agenda for this event. First of all, we will have high-level panel discussion with speakers from leading institutions, farm organizations, and youth representatives to discuss the challenges and opportunities for building resilient agricultural production and food value chains, which generally is called agri-food or agricultural food and food systems. For this high-level panel today, I'm very happy actually to introduce and will be speaking with Ms. Mami Misutori, is the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General and the Head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. The role of UNDRR is to support countries and stakeholders in the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030. The Special Representative ensures the strategic and operational coherence between disaster risk reduction, climate change, and sustainable development agendas, as well as the linkage with UN Secretary General Prevention Agenda and with humanitarian action. Our second panelist is Arianna Giulidori, is the Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization, a position to which she was appointed in December 2017. After her degree in communication sciences, she got a master's in economics and rural development at Siena University in Italy. In her present position as WFO Secretary General, she has been strongly promoting a solid governance of the association and a wide set of international partnerships to ensure that the farmers can fully play their fundamental role in the sustainability challenge, and farmers are central actually to any change. Then we have Rain Paulson, is the director of FAO's Office of Emergencies and Resilience, to which he was appointed recently. Prior to joining FAO, Mr. Paulson served as Director ad interim of the Coordination Division at the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, in Geneva, Switzerland. Then we have our colleague Romina Cavatazi, is the lead economist at the Research and Impact Assessment Division at the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, where she is in charge of leading the Impact Assessment Cluster. She has also led the preparation of the Rural Development Report on Food System Transformation for Rural Prosperity. Prior to this, Ms. Cavatazi was the lead technical specialist for environment and climate in the Environment and Climate Division of IFAD. Her work aims at generating evidence for decision and policy making using research and the impact assessment, with a particular focus on climate change, natural resource economics, and poverty alleviation. And then, last but not least, we have Terry Otieno, Youth Secretary, Kenya Red Cross Society and Global Focal Point, UN Major Group for Children and Youth. Terry is a social activist passionate about humanitarian causes. She is the Kenya Red Cross Youth Board Secretary in Nairobi. She recently finished a bachelor's degree in public policy and administration. Terry is manager and founder of Mini Where, a leadership website geared towards nurturing upcoming youth change makers. Welcome to you all, panelists. Before we go to the panelists with the specific questions and discussion points, we have the pleasure of having a video message to kick off our session from Sandrine Dixon Declerc, co-chair UN Food System Summit Action Track 5 on building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks and stresses, and she is the co-president of the Club de Rome, or Club of Rome. We'll just go to the message for about 5 minutes.
The summit is guided by 5 key action tracks, and I am co-chair of the Resilience Action Track. And what we're trying to do in the summit itself is to bring together all of the key stakeholders from all over the globe to achieve tangible and positive results within a holistic approach to the food system. What we want from this summit is to generate significant action and measurable progress towards the 2020 agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals. We also want to ensure that we raise awareness and elevate public discussion on food systems transformation. Again, food systems as a holistic system, and look at all the different aspects of the system. Thirdly, we want to develop principles to guide governments and other stakeholders looking to leverage their food systems to support the SDGs. And then fourthly, ensure that the summit's outcomes continue to drive new action and impact and progress. So we hope that actually all of the different efforts from the Food System Summit will actually continue to take on a life of their own and actually really shift the food system into a more resilient system. About the work that we're doing, I would like to let you know that we're trying to really address the new and challenging risks that are emerging. And that is why it's so important that we work together to address risk. We know that the system is incredibly complex, and to integrate risk management across the system is fundamental if we're going to build resilience. This is a key in terms of looking at future pandemics, but it also is a learning coming out of COVID. The impacts of which we saw were already skewed to the world's most vulnerable populations. And we can say the same about climate change. We can say the same about biodiversity loss. We know that there are many other challenges, as I just indicated, these different tipping points, which are going to continue to create challenges for people across the globe, for governments to solve, which will which will create instability, further pandemics, economic shocks, and this will require greater resilience and solutions. So what we want to try to do within the food system resilience action track is to look very closely at all of the elements of the food value chain and where we can decrease the risk from these different shocks. The track aims to ensure that food systems that are affected by all these shocks can ensure, maintain functionality, can recover and improve and transform to a better off state. This actually means that we need to focus on productive disruption, to be really in the context of the global crisis and to think about, as I indicated, pandemics, biodiversity loss, and global climate emergencies. So why is a comprehensive risk management approach so important? Interconnected global crises, as I've indicated, are unfolding, and we need to think through all of these crises and the mechanisms that we need to put in place in order to manage the risks. The impact on livelihoods and communities, economies across the globe have risen dramatically. And in a world that is already dealing with all of these different emergencies, right now, what we call also at the Club of Rome, where I am co-president, a planetary emergency, must actually be addressed from a resilience lens and from a risk management lens. So we have to put in place a framework for disaster risk reduction. We have to think about how we integrate risk also within existing agreements like the Paris Agreement, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and the Convention to Combat Desertification, among others. We need to think about how we can truly integrate risk at all elements of the food value chain and need to have a multidisciplinary approach to risk reduction, engaging various actors, all the way from those that are producing and on the front lines, the smallholders, the farmers, but those that are also consuming, the communities, and to ensure that actually our risk management tools are going to enable these communities, no matter which shock or stress on their system, to continue to thrive and survive. So I'm very hopeful that the work that we can do together with the risk management community and all of the experts working with us through the resilience track, that we can put forward the coalitions that we are producing and promoting, that we can ensure that the solutions that we've received from many parts of the world are taken into consideration so that we can truly have a future resilient food system.
Thank you very much, Sandrine. I think she gave us a very good basis actually for our discussion. We have heard a lot of the integrated approach, multidisciplinarity in our working together. And I think those would set the stage for us. And I will just continue with that and now come to our panelists. And my first question, of course, is to Ms. Mami Misutori, UNDRR, and the food systems, as we just heard also, and the attainment of the SDGs are currently facing an unprecedented conjunction of threats from different sources. How can risk be effectively understood and managed to provide solutions for sustainable, resilient systems? Over to you.
Thank you very much for the question. And at the outset, I'd like to thank the other organizers for co-organizing with UNDRR this very important dialogue just 4 days before the Food System Pre-Summit in Rome. And answering your question, well, the gist of the answer lies in the global blueprint for disaster risk reduction, which is the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, which was adopted in 2015, along with Paris Agreement, Agenda 2030. And our mandate at UNDRR is to support member states and all stakeholders so that we can implement the Sendai framework, which is essentially about managing disaster risk as opposed to managing disaster after they strike us. And this is what the Vice President of the Club of Rome was saying. And what is true is that right now we are, as the Vice President mentioned, faced with such unprecedented uncertainty, complexity, and volatility. And here, food systems must be resilient and agile, but it's not easy. Food systems transformation towards resilience and sustainability is urgently needed, and we need to understand what are the elements that need to be embedded in our policies and directions in order to fulfill the goal that we provide healthy and nutritious food for all. So I'd like to mention three things that we need to do. First, we need to start by understanding the risk that surrounds us. This is basic, and this is the absolute core. The risk landscape is changing rapidly. Risk can no longer be considered in isolation. It's interconnected, cascades along the entire food system, and the impact of risk are multi-pronged, long-lasting, and not linear. Therefore, we cannot go on having siloed approaches. We must move towards innovative and integrated multi-hazard, multi-sector strategies. COVID-19 has taught us that hazards don't come one by one. While we were experiencing COVID, there were so many extreme weather events. So multi-hazard, multi-sector strategies is the key. We need a comprehensive whole of society approach to build resilient food systems. The second point is that we need to factor in both disaster and climate risk together. The global dynamic of climate change, disasters, epidemics, economic shocks, protracted crisis, and the loss of ecosystem services must be considered all together simultaneously. This is crucial for our efforts to accelerate progress for sustainable, resilient, and equitable food systems. And finally, the third point that I would bring here is that building resilience is also about identifying the vulnerable and giving the vulnerable groups, people, a voice in the making and implementing of national and local strategies for disaster risk reduction. This is about risk governance. And if we don't include the voice of the vulnerable people, then disasters will become even larger. And this is what is absolutely the case in having a resilient food system as well. And this is why, together with governments, civil societies, and the private sector, communities must be given a central role to play in building resilience. So, Chair, I will stop here and I will give over to you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. I think one of the big takeaways is we need to manage risk, not simply managing disasters. We are usually tending to do. And I think that really sums up the 3 points that you give us, is to think from a risk management perspective and be from short term up to the medium and long term need to be thought through in the same thread and vein. Thank you very much for that. We'll definitely come back to that in the breakaway also teams. So I will now go to Arianna from the World Farm Organization. We know that farmers and rural communities are amongst the most vulnerable, and exactly this Mr. Turio also said her third point is about the vulnerable, who the vulnerable are, and really identifying them are the most vulnerable to disasters and climate change. How can we create an enabling environment for farmers to play their key role as agents of change for building resilient food systems? Over to you, Arianna.
Thank you very much, Shukri. Good morning or good afternoon to all the participants. I'm honored of sharing the co-convening role with UNDRR and with FAO. I'm particularly grateful to the colleagues from the other organizations. For us as farmers, being part of this conversation is fundamental. And let me start from a point that was already raised by Mami and Sandrine before me. So on exactly, and you were referring to, Shukri, on managing risk instead than managing disasters. You know, we the farmers, it would be easy for me to start talking about disasters and climate effects. Nowadays, the World Farmers Organization is based in Rome physically, so in Europe, and it's in the news. The floods that are devastating our farms in Northern Europe, or the droughts that are devastating farms in Northern America. So I could start from there, but we at WFO, we want to we prefer to come to the table with solutions and with positive arguments. And even at times of unprecedented challenges like the pandemic of COVID-19, farmers have already proved to be resilient much more than any definition, any conversation that we can have. We saw value chain disruptions, but food was brought to the table of the consumers, of the families, and producers kept on producing. Disruptions happened elsewhere in the value chain, not at the farmer gate. I think this is a fundamental piece at and the recognition, a point that is worth mentioning before we approach this pre-summit of the United Nations on food systems. That's the proof that farmers are resilient. And let me also add, I am also proud that resilience goes hand in hand with solidarity and with attention to the community. So again, I'm very pleased by the words that Mami spent about the role of communities. Farmers are really anchoring rural communities. Farmers are above all families, family farmers, and their role was incredibly powerful in bringing food to the most vulnerable communities at COVID times. Just an example. But let me go to your specific question. So how can we create this enabling environment then? I think it's important that the overall political dimension starts to recognize officially the real identity of the farmers. I know it might sound obvious, well, farmers are food producers. Well, I think that recognizing farmers as economic actors, as businesses of every kind of scale that produce food is a first and fundamental element to empower them to be able to play their role. And in this space, we could open huge chapters, but there's no time. I hope the breakout rooms will go into that, about tools that could support them in terms of climate smart finance, or support extension services that could help them grow in the capacity to better tackle the risks that we're facing. But farmers also play a fundamental and pivotal environmental role. And we must recognize it officially, and we must start to pay them, to compensate them for these ecosystemic services that they are delivering. If we are able to do that, we're going to see a huge shift in the capacity of farmers in investing and innovating to improve resilience and to ensure that they have the best available science that is serving the need of not only their business, but also their environmental role. And thirdly, I'd love to see recognized officially, as I was saying, the social role of farmers as anchors of rural communities, as families. And because we are approaching a people summit and a solution summit, there's no better actor and no better stakeholder than the farmers to embrace the holistic dimension that it's meant to take us to the success in the Agenda 2030 and beyond. So how can we do it? It has already been said that we need to manage risk instead of prevention. So if the policy environment if it's enabling the farmers under these three dimensions, we will see them thriving. We will see them committing as actors directly for resilience. So for sure we need support. For sure we need extension services, finance, and policies that are friendly. But we We are there to be actors of this change. We want to drive this change. We know we can do it, but we cannot do it on our own. And I'll stop by saying that it's partnership, the real and huge game changer that will make us succeed. And when we work on managing risk, prevention, or managing, unfortunately, also disasters, it's in this incredible interconnection between farmers, other economic actors in the value chain, civil society, research and academia, government, that we will find the right way forward to win in terms of agriculture, because we do represent the interests of the farmers here, but to win for our planet and for the people who live on it. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you, Arianna. I think you really took it up very nicely and gave us that we're not starting from zero. Farmers know about resilience. They are already there. It just needs now the allyship, the solidarity that is needed globally for those who are concerned, and especially in their role as economic, as well as environmental, and also the social role, that's giving them the basis for that. And you have really identified nicely how that we can support them in the specific areas, especially with improving the enabling environment, the policy, the space, and others globally, nationally, and in community. With that, then, I will move now to my colleague in FAO, Rain Paulsen, with the third question, Director of the Office of Emergency and Resilience in FAO. So, recent FAO reports show that hunger is on the rise, driven by conflict, climate variability, extremes, and economic slowdowns, all aggravated again by the COVID-19 pandemic, as was mentioned also by the other panelists. What can be done to achieve the goal to end hunger, food insecurity, and all forms of malnutrition by 2030? Over to you, Rain.
Shukri, thank you so much. And distinguished guests and colleagues, lovely to see so many people online that have signed up for the participation in this independent dialogue today. And just at the outset, deep appreciation from my side and from FAO side for the excellent collaboration with UNDRR and with World Farmer Organization in convening this discussion and beyond, and also with FAO on an ongoing basis, and also in the context of this panel. So great to be here. And participants online, you'll hear, perhaps unsurprisingly, I think, a lot of coherence and resonance between the comments that we're making. I mean, I was listening, obviously, with great attention to what both Mami and Arianna were sharing, and I have a number of complementary points that I feel both of them are made in such a compelling way. So apologies if I repeat some of these things, but if there is coherence, it's not because our messages have been lined up in advance of this meeting. I think it is born out of this growing, emerging experience that is clearly pointing to where we need to address our collective attention if we want to make the type of transformative change that we're all committed to. So let me maybe, Shukri, come back to a couple of quick points. I mean, you referred to some studies and some analysis that's underway. So, I mean, just on that, I do think it's really important, that we're clear on the fact that the latest analysis, including the studies that Shukri, you referred to, signal a number of things quite clearly. There is obviously, unfortunately, deeply concerning global rise in acute and chronic food insecurity, accompanied by deepening malnutrition. And when we look at these reports taken together, the latest global report on food crises, the latest state of food insecurity and nutrition, the SOFI report, which just came out, and the 2021 publication on the impact of disasters and crisis on agriculture and food security. I mean, all of this, the messages out of all of these reports have to constitute a rallying cry for us as we move forward, if we're ever going to achieve these ambitious but fundamental and essential goals of Agenda 2030. And these reports are pointing to things which, in a sense, just represent the tip of the iceberg. But I hope and I believe they represent a rallying cry and a call for us. Interestingly, maybe paradoxically, farmers, and Ariana, you were articulating this in such a compelling way, farmers, and I would say perhaps in particular smallholders, but also food workers, and here in total, of course, we're talking about some 2.5 billion people of our total global population, a huge percentage of our global population. These are individuals that are essential to our global food supply. And they are also at the front lines of the global crises that we are facing. And you've heard reference to them already, the experience of the tragedy of this pandemic that the world is living through, what's happening in terms of climate change and the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, the impacts of conflict, not least, and the interface and interplay between conflict and violence and food insecurity and many more. And precisely because farmers are at the center of these realities, they must also be at the center of decision making. And so, I mean, I agree fully with these comments that Ariana was making in that regard. If we want to be able to avert the growing food crisis, and if we want to be able to transform the agri-food systems, which I know is part of our shared ambition, having the individuals who are most impacted by this at the center of the conversations, I think, is indispensable. Their agency is central and vital. So as we near the Food Systems Summit, hopefully we can be clear in our messaging collectively on this to decision makers and decision takers at all levels. All of us, farmers, food workers, public, private sector, humanitarian and development workers, those that whose experience and focus and mandate is perhaps more in the climate area, those who work on issues of peace, all of us need to come together in a different way moving forward. I can only just underscore what both Mami and Ariana have said about just how vital it is that we move away from a responsive posture to events, to addressing in a meaningful, comprehensive, integrated way the risks that are driving the events that we have been focused on in the past. I mean, that's clearly a priority for us as FAO, and as you can hear participants online from what other panelists have already said, I think that's a shared priority for all of us. So shifting from crisis management to this type of multiple risk management approaches is fundamental. And to do that, of course, we need different types of capacities, especially for and with the most vulnerable and the at-risk, in order to anticipate and absorb and adapt to the interplay between these colliding shocks and stresses that are threatening not just food production, but the entire food value chain and food systems. So as I think we're internalizing collectively much more of a systems approach to the realities that we're facing, it's also clear, I think, to all of us that there are no silver bullets, there are no magic bullets that resolve all of this, but there are, I think, many paths of action that are promising, that together can point us towards very encouraging ways forward. And I do think it's important that we keep a close eye on what happens in the policy domain, what happens in the financing domain, as well as what happens from an operational perspective, and bringing these three elements together. There are many examples I could point to, but just to run through a few of these paths and opportunities that exist in terms of building a shared narrative on what we do on the policy and the financing and the practice side. Work in agro-climatic disaster and crisis risk food security information systems, I think, is key. Mami, you at the outset were talking about the importance of understanding the risk around us, and this is fundamental. A shared understanding of the risk around us, driven by data and analysis, I think is indispensable. Related to that, the work that's underway on early warning systems with actionable alerts. So this is about, this isn't just about information for the sake of information, it's how this information drives action at the right point in time to mitigate the challenges that we're facing. Disaster and crisis risk governance is indispensable. Risk transfer mechanisms, such as social protection and insurance schemes. There is some compelling practice in that regard that we simply need to see how we can move to scale in different ways. Disaster and climate risk reduction, conflict sensitive agriculture, good practices and innovations in that regard, I think is indispensable. work we do around risk proofing of grey and hybrid infrastructure along the whole food value chain represents another key priority for us. There are many different areas I could list, but I won't go through all of them in the interest of time. But I would just say, and Shukri introduced me with the title of Director of Emergencies and Resilience. So I'd be remiss if I didn't just say, and with all of these things, for us as FAO, and I know for others on the call, bringing together emergency preparedness with anticipatory action and effective emergency response, I think, is indispensable. But moving beyond what has in the past been practice of just responsive actions after an event, I think is indispensable. So these things are mutually supportive. They should be mutually supportive, and this is, I think, where we need to place our effort. Moving towards both collective as well as individual risk management actions are at the heart of moving towards more inclusive resilience and sustainable agri-food systems at all. But I'm really encouraged that the format for this event is not just a panel discussion, as interesting as it is, but to move into breakout rooms where I hope we can hear from all of the different participants on both experiences, models, opportunities that we can coalesce around together. But thank you again for the opportunity. I'll stop there for now, Shukri, and hand back to you. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Rain. I really think you have nicely tied up Mr. Turi, giving us a very nice chapeau of the overall disaster management, moving to risk management. And I think that thinking really being an overall, and all of us having, and Arianna giving us the main stakeholders in this, their experiences and whatever, and you tying it up, some of the outcomes not doing good, the acute and chronic food insecurity that we have now is actually a wake-up call for us to actually do better by giving us also what needs to be done in all this. So with these now, I think we'll move now to Romina, a colleague in FAD. And the question to you actually is also from the work of IFAD in assisting countries is goes like this. Financing is key for the sustainable development goals achievement and food systems. How can we maximize the impact of these investments so they contribute to inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food systems? Over to you, Romina.
Thank you very much, Shukri, and thanks for inviting me here today. I think, as Rain also mentioned, I'm repeating and transferring a lot of what has been already said into the financing realm. And I don't think that's too bad. I mean, being repetitive in this context, I think it's very positive because, as others have very nicely mentioned before me, what we need is coordination, multidisciplinarity, and integrated approach. And I think that can be very well reflected also within the financing needed. I think indeed that financing is key to enabling change and creating incentives for change, for the change and transformation we want to see. And I like that your question is not just about merely increasing financing, but it's about improving the enabling characteristics of financing to support transformation. And in this context, I think it is essential to redirecting capital into what we see as a circular economy. And I think food systems, so moving beyond agriculture and including something that is a system approach that includes not only production, but also distribution, consumption, and disposal after consumption. What happens after consumption is also important. So it's a circular system. And we need to invest into something that is environmentally sustainable models of food system. This would generate higher quality and lower risk economic growth by also opening new business opportunities and in a comprehensive and integrated manner. In terms of amount, before the COVID, the Business and Sustainable Development Commission had already estimated the value of for a more knowledge intensive and resource use efficient and nature-based system at up to 2.3 trillion per year. After the COVID crisis, I think that we all think that this amount would need to even be increased. Now, to make agricultural financing work for food system transformation in a way that is also, as been mentioned, proactive in terms of integrating risks and looking at broad risks and building a resilient food system, I think various actions are needed and can be taken. Perhaps we can group them into four main areas. First of all, we need coordination. Much greater coordination is needed between and within public sector financing, because we know that there are many bilateral development assistance, but also many multilaterals. At the same time, at country level, there is an abundance of small, uncoordinated projects which provide support, but no synergies are used across the various small interventions, causing smaller objectives achieved compared to what can be done if these are coordinated. And they also imply high transaction costs for recipient countries. Similarly, also within the international financing institution and the UN system at large, often we pursue individual country assistance strategies. All of these are examples of parallel and scattered exercises that struggle to converge on a common framework and towards a common objective. So coordination is first and foremost the key action needed to achieve what we want in terms of food system transformed also towards resilience. The second point is innovation. Sorry. More innovation is also needed in the use of blended finance and private sector involvement. So we know that the private sector is essential to to coordinate financing needs, and blended finance involve the use of different financing sources and instruments to finance investments that have both commercial but also environmental and social returns. Also, the social aspects that Arianna has mentioned and highlighted is of key importance. Now, one of the most promising for agricultural transformation is blending finance sources with climate finance. There are a lot of examples that we can learn from and use and build upon. For example, an investment that promotes sustainable and diversified food production system can include, and often in fact include, climate resilient crop variety, but also climate resilient infrastructure. This may result in reduced losses, more consistent market access, improved local and national food security, and increased income for stakeholders across the food system. In such a context, a combination of grants, concessional loans, equity resources may be justifiable to provide adequate incentive to achieve a desired result. Third point, and that's also been mentioned before, include and expand civil society organization through partnership with public sector financing organization. This is also essential. I think Arianna also mentioned this, particularly to guarantee ownership, but also to ensure that results are sustainable after the intervention and impacts are maintained over time. Finally, as a fourth point, incentives and instruments are needed to allow for the integration of environmental values into agricultural production system. This could range from supply chain innovations that create sustainability performance incentives through, for example, labeling, payment for ecosystem service program linked to agricultural investment, and sustainably linked debts, including loans, bonds with environmental conditions attached. And also natural linked insurance based on adaptation and improved resilience driven by better environmental management. I think these are the four key areas, but they all point towards coordination, multidisciplinarity, and integrated approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Romina. And you really now brought us, once we have set the scene of having what risk management is, what are the pillars of risk management, who are the main stakeholders in all this, especially from the farmer's perspective, in all their areas, whether pastoralists, crop farmers, fishers, forest dependent, all of them together in this food system that we have, and also by identifying later who the food insecure are and to what extent food insecurity is becoming one big problem in the world and what needs to be done. We brought concretely also then where financing could help us in this to incentivize our interventions, especially not simply the amount and the quantity of finance, but the quality of it, and also the interaction and having innovative approaches into this, and in the end also the ownership of the main stakeholders. They have to feel that they are owning this incentive that is coming their way. Thank you very much, Romina, for tying it for us. So now we will move actually to Terry Otieno. She is here today actually representing youth, and her question then would be, youth empowerment is crucial for food systems transformation to be inclusive. What innovations are the youth pushing forward for resilient food systems transformation? Over to you, Terry.
Thank you very much. Youth empowerment is indeed crucial in transformation, and inclusivity is to be realized within the food system. Youth empowerment is crucial because youth make up one of the largest population percentage across the globe, with the estimates of around 16 to 18% as of 2019. So that's such a huge population if you look at it. And that is why it's crucial for us as youth to be empowered, because one, we are most energetic and therefore give a heightened labor force. We also come in as think tanks and the highest consumer of food. Yeah. So food systems encompass three main components that, if you look at it, require youth to be empowered for the food system to be resilient and transformative. So we have food availability as the first component of the food system. And in food availability, we talk about production, distribution, and exchange. Again, here we see that if youth are empowered and we end up being energetic, this is where our labor force comes in. And then we have the second component of the food system, which is food access. Food access pertains to affordability, allocation, and preference. So if we are empowered and we can work, it means we have economic empowerment, and therefore we can consume the food. That's the very first thing. We can consume the food. Yeah, and then we have the fourth, the third food system component, which is food utilization. How do we use this food? Our nutritional value, the social value, and food safety. So again, if we are empowered as youth, we will come in and support the food system as a whole. Yeah, and now to the question on what innovations are the youth pushing forward for resilient food system transformations? We have several innovations that come in different forms. One of the first innovation I think of as the youth is the technological innovations. So in technology, we do several things as youth. We are engaged in research where we come up with yield enhancing and conservation technology. We come up with apps that track production progress. We come up with the apps that allow pest control and all. And yeah, so we also allow technology to come in, and we are able to say if it's in terms of food production, the tillage and all is done sufficiently. And then there's also the second innovation I can think of is policy innovations. We are, as youth, we need to be empowered in order to be a part of policy, from the creation and enactment, and also just fulfilling them. We need the government to eliminate subsidies for nutrient-poor foods and conserve those funds to invest those nutritious crops such as fruits and vegetables. We need subsidies for agricultural inputs that can also lead to overuse of inputs and more of greenhouse gases. Yeah, so the third innovation that I can think of is institutional innovations, where based on culture and our way of life, we realize that youth are, if it's inheriting stuff, we inherit stuff when we are old. We need institutional innovations where policies can be brought in order for us to be able to own factors of production, such as land, while we are still youth, so that when we get into the food system at the bottom line, we are able to impact it with a bottom-up approach instead of from up, where we are just think tanks and we can only be involved in research. If we are allowed to own land at a young age, we'll be able to start like from the production level. So a bottom-up approach will really help in making the food system resilient. So that's it for me. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. And I think you touched upon, yes, the youth, the importance of them, and especially now with the technological world and the youth being adept into this technological world, to be part of the innovations, to be part of the policy making, to be part of, the new way of working in all the chain in food supply. I think you nicely put it. And I think those are, the youth are one big stakeholder in all this. So in the interest of time, I will just go to the last question. And of course, I will come back to you, Terry. Just briefly, as part of the expected outcomes of the summit, what are, for you, the most urgent priorities for achieving risk and climate resilient food systems by 2030? Terry.
All right, my priorities would favor areas around, say, one, systematic approaches to crisis and risk management within the food system, which will set forth outcomes that address the management of systemic, intersecting, and colliding risks and crises, threatening and affecting agriculture and food systems by itself. And my second priority would be adopting an integrated approach to enhancing food system resilience, which would again set forth approaches that integrate relevant stakeholders in different sectors that are administrative. Because if we address the administrative side of the food system, then we are sure that risks can be managed and climate resilience can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. That is very, very clear points there. The same question for Mina. What would be your expectation?
So first of all, for me, it is important to ensure that no one is left behind. Now, the COVID crisis, the climate impacts, the dramatic events we're seeing these days, they all show that vulnerabilities are higher for people that are often marginalized and that have poor access to resources and options. These include rural poor, it includes women, indigenous people, youth. So to me, it is important that first and foremost, transformation is put forward, ensuring inclusive strategies, ensuring that nobody is left behind within planetary boundaries, and also putting nutrition at the center of the pathways for transformation. Secondly, ensure that coordination is promoted across the various stakeholders involved, across ministries, financing sources, civil society, and the private sector. Finally, it's important to develop and promote technologies and innovation that incorporate risks, climate consideration, and other risk disasters in a proactive manner into planning and programming for development interventions.
Thank you very much. Same question to Rain.
Shukri, thank you. So maybe three quick points. So, I mean, firstly, and I touched on this before, but we urgently need to embrace a shared vision and narrative that puts comprehensive risk management at the center of all of our decision making, our action and our investments. And this is precisely to achieve what Romina was just describing about leaving no one behind, right? So this sort of shared vision around comprehensive risk management is key. Secondly, and I was touching on this a little bit before too, but we know and we have a suite of tools, resources, approaches within the agri-food sector, and indeed in different domains. And this challenge now that I think is in front of us is how do we defragment? How do we connect these things in a different way to achieve the change that we're talking about? And this is, you know, often we talk about the nexus between humanitarian development and peace actors, but actually we're talking about something that's even broader than that. But you know, taking the richness of experience in the tools and connecting them in a different way behind and in support of this shared vision and narrative that I was just describing on comprehensive risk management is key. The third final point would just be to say, and this is really an appeal also to everyone on the call, you know, we have this opportunity now with the Food Systems Summit, and the intention brought by the summit and its many dialogues really needs all of our collective voices, the wisdom that exists across different states, and you know, to see how we can drive forward the discussions. And so really just to encourage all of us and each of us to take full advantage of the opportunities of the discussions next week in the pre-summit and beyond as we go into September and beyond to drive forward with experiences, with you know, with what works in different settings, with ideas for how to connect in different ways the work that we do. So much more that could be said. I'll stop there in the interest of time. Thank you, Shukri.
Thank you very much, Arianna.
Well, it's great. So I don't want to repeat, but I agree completely with what the colleagues have just said. From the specific farmers' perspective, let me give you three priorities looking at the summit. First and foremost, we want to see farmers at the very heart of food systems. Everybody says it. We want to see it now in action for real. And farmers mean farmers in all of their beautiful diversity. Farmers are of all sizes. Farmers have different business choices and options they can take. And we do value each one of them as long as they contribute to sustainable development. And at WFO, we also say that when we accommodate the interest as economic actors of the smallest and the most vulnerable, we are sure that we are setting the right path for all other stakeholders to thrive. And that's very important. And I hope this is also partially answering to some of the questions that I'm reading in the chat. Second point, action. Focus on action and on the country level. The top priorities that we have is to see many governments embracing this challenge together with the stakeholders to build these coalitions and to make sure that resilient food systems are on the top priority of the summit and beyond. And third priority, seeing partnerships in real life. See the partnerships where but believe me, it's not a word. A partner is not simply someone you're imposing your standards onto. Farmers have always been treated as targets of policies or targets of someone else's decisions in the value chain. Farmers as price takers, farmers as beneficiaries. No, we want farmers to be seen as partners in a system, and we must sit down and negotiate new approaches, new kind of contracts, new agreements that will make all of the actors win. So again, it's not about having one approach winning over the others. It's about making sure that this world is sustainable for all. Over. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, Tsunami Missouri, last but not least, please come your conclusion.
Thank you, Shukri. So I'll start by saying that I really agree with what everybody said. And we say this a lot in many events, but today I'm really saying this because there's no doubt that we agreed, we repeated, and we overlap positively that the paradigm transformative shift that we need for resilient food system is to have comprehensive risk management, change from managing disaster to managing disaster risks. But my question is, but why don't we do it, right? We all saying this, but it's not happening. We're seeing it, we saw it in Europe last week, we see it in China this week. It's because one thing is that many of us see prevention as a cost, not investment. So we need to change this. The second thing is what we call the no glory of prevention. If we are successful in preventing, we don't see the success. But do we want to see something we saw last week in Northern Europe to repeat? No, we don't. So we do need more leadership. We need to see more strong leadership coming out of this summit at all levels. Governments, of course, but not only governments, and in the cities, in the private sector, in the boardrooms, among the youth, and among groups like the World Farmers Organization. We need leadership. COVID-19 is a terrible tragedy, but the silver lining is we see that awareness is rising for the need for prevention, for the need for multi-sectoral, multi-hazard, comprehensive risk approach. But we need to scale it up. And we cannot forget this once we get out of COVID, because if we do forget it, we are still in that vicious circle of disaster, response, recovery, and repeat. And we need to get out of it. Over to you, Shukri.
Thank you. Really a nice conclusion. We have touched on what we need to do, what are the main issues, why are we doing it, and also how are we going to do it. We have got very good ways and innovative actually ideas that we have, and hopefully we will dig them deeper in our breakaway sessions. I really would like to thank you. Thank you so much for the panelists for giving us their insights, which would really help us now to go a little bit deeper. And this now panel to meeting to come up with some tangible things to contribute to the process that we have started, all of us together. It was succinct, it was to the point, and I think we summarized all your points in the end. It really gives us a very good picture. So now we have our time. This is now the segment where we would be ending this, and we hope this discussion has inspired some ideas and thoughts in all of us, and which will be available in the next portion of the event. As already mentioned, you will now be randomly assigned, all of us would be assigned to breakout groups to further discuss the topics at hand for about half an hour. So we have half an hour to do that. Please, in your breakout group, you will meet your pair of facilitators and a note taker. They will guide you through tasks at hand, and they will support us with reporting back to the plenary feedback session. At the end of the 30 minutes, the groups will automatically close, and you will be redirected to this platform. There are the dialogue now seek, as you can see already in the breakout discussions, they seek to contribute to the discussions of the resilience building in agri-food systems in the context of the UN System Summit. In the next 30 minutes, then we will want you to discuss these three questions revolving around the integration of disaster risk management into the agriculture and food sectors, specifically what disaster and climate risk management practices are you implementing to build resilient agricultural production and value chains, food value chains? What are the challenges in addressing disaster risk and climate change in agricultural production and food value chains? What opportunities do you identify to integrate disaster and climate risk management into food systems? So in the overall management, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities? So with that, I think we will now go to the breakout group discussions. I think we are all back. Okay. Thank you very much to you all. I know in breakout that I was there was, we have cut short some interventions. So maybe that has happened also in the others. So please put your suggestions, whether it is opportunities, whether it is challenges, and what you do is in the chat so that we collect them and we will go. I think we're all back. So thank you very much for that. I think that was really great. We still have lots of you here. Before we go back on the group discussion, I would like to invite you all to access the Mentimeter link. You will see on the chat box, it is there. We would like to know what is the most exciting and urgent message you take away from this session. So it's just to give a brief on that. You can add as many inputs as you like, whenever you want. So if anything struck you from our panel discussion earlier, or from your group discussions, or now as you listen to the different group debrief, please do that. If you have trouble accessing the Mentimeter link, use the chat box instead. You will display your feedback at the end. Now, I think it's time to go back to listen. And let me pass the floor then to the first group, which is also Antoine will give us a brief on what went there. Antoine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shukri. I had the honor of being the facilitator of Breakout Group 1, along with Elsa, who was supporting as note taker. We had about 18 participants with interesting representativity from both Europe, Southeast Asia, and Africa, and had a really interesting discussion building upon the great panel that we had. We discussed the 3 questions together, obviously, because they're linked. If we discuss future opportunities and challenges, we need to emphasize based on our practices. A number of colleagues shared very interesting practices that already exist, that they are already implementing in the field, since one of the main priorities that we have identified is coordination, collaboration, multi-sectoral visions, going beyond silos. A number of kind of integrative assessment tools were shared that discuss both climate adaptation and climate information services, and that also discuss social and environmental climate assessment. So practices out there discussed, we covered issues going from integrative assessments, going to practices in the grassroots. So for example, also farmer field school approach was mentioned a number of times, and the importance of involving, having participative assessments. The challenges were also a number of challenges. The main one is also one of the issues that colleagues pointed out is that the funding out there doesn't put risk management as a priority. Donors may have other priorities as final goal, and so you need to find a way to adapt also the projects. No? Another challenge was with regards to levels, coordination between subnational levels, national, international, be it on information services, be it on policy levels. In general, one of the main challenges that was emphasized throughout was the lack of access to finance, lack of access to technologies, lack of access to extension services. And those are part of the opportunities towards the future. You know? A number of proposals were highlighted. First of all, farmers present in the group reminded everyone just to say it's true, farming is all about adaptation, and farmers have the resilience capacities in them. Could be strengthened and empowered. So that was one of the emphasis was on empowering farmers, empowering farmer organizations, which are the liaison, the group that can arrive to the field, no? And ensuring access, for example, to technologies, ensuring that these technologies not have a negative impact, but access to, for example, weather information, advisory, extension services, and in general, the emphasis was that the focus needs to be on ensuring that adaptation is beneficial both to the ecosystem and to the well-being of farmers. There's a lot more that was said. There's an emphasis on agroecological practices, also on accessing climate finance. But I think considering I'm already at the 3-minute marker, I'll leave it at there for now. I'll pass the floor back to you. Thank you, Shukri.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we will put them actually all in. So in the interest of time, I will move now to Jean-Claude for group 2.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Shukri. So I had also an honor to facilitate this breakout session of 16 participants. So I would just want to quickly share with you some of the good practice and also the main challenges and opportunity. Starting with the practice. So some of our colleagues have shared, interesting practice going on here, like this practice from the World Farm Organization that is putting farmers at the center of the change, trying to feed the science from ideas coming from the farmers. So I found this very interesting. So meaning that a farmer, they are contributing to generate the science by what they are experiencing on a daily basis. So there is also some practice on some NGO, partnering with some private entity to generate digital information and to make those available to farmers, such as earlier warning, and those are the tools that can be used to as a risk management strategies. So other strategies that are going on as a practice is enhance the capacity at various level of actors involving in the agriculture sector. Also has a capacity through training. So other practice that are going on here is use of water for production, but not only for production, but also for domestic use. So another practice that was mentioned here was integration of a tree growing with crops. Very interesting, and they are doing that by sensitization and education. So some of the challenges that was mentioned here is as Antoine also mentioned it. Is the founding is still a challenge, and it seems that the focus now is much more on the health rather than on the helping farmers to bring up to come up with some risk management. So also lack of coordination, organization has been also mentioned here, and a number of opportunities here. Just as my last word is, the policies are there. So what can we do to implement those? So it's an opportunity. Policies are already there. So it's what the remaining is to implement those policies. Over, Shukri.
Thank you very much, Jean-Claude. So for Group 3, now we go to Louisa.
Thank you very much, Shukri. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm very happy to say that in my groups there were many farmers, members of the WFO, but also representatives of other organizations who could contribute with their own experience, including FAO and an organization in Nepal who works very closely with the smallholder farmers there. And that experiences that were reported are quite diverse, but still with the same challenges, and the requests are almost the same. For example, there are areas where temperatures are rapidly increasing, and it's not possible to even foresee how to readjust the production method for the next year. In this case, what farmers are trying to do is to diversify the production to make sure that in a way or another, they are also able to bring their own business forward and not being collapsed by the climate disasters. This is something that was really shared by all the participants, so I'm reporting this point as first, because the diversification of production methods and products actually has been identified as one of the possible solutions to be considered as a way forward. And the other solutions are regards the use of innovation. Innovation has been identified as one of the priorities for the farmers. Innovation means methods and technologies that can help farmers implement precision agriculture, so to be able to take care of the soils, of circular economy, but also remain profitable within the planetary boundaries. Of course, innovation brings, by definition, access to finance, and there was a clear and shared message that also financial institutions have to be involved in the process, as well as private sector, in very strong partnerships among the three actors. In all of this, the policy framework is also important. Government have from one side increase or at least maintain the incentives that they are giving to the farmers directly, and on the other side create a policy environment that can really enhance and the resilience of farmers, also in implementing those solutions that farmers have already identified but probably don't have the means to implement them. And the one recommendation as whole for the Food System Summit is the farmers are very, very on board of the discussion. They want to be heard, they have solutions, they want to sit at the table and participate in the decision-making process, because the responsibility of the food system is shared. That it is a very interconnected systems, and farmers want to be here in sharing responsibilities, but also contributions together with the other actors. Thank you very much, Shukri, and I would like to thank my group because they have been just great. Over.
Yes, it shows actually. Thank you very much, for that group report. Now to group 4, and I will give the floor to my colleague Mira. Go ahead.
Thank you, Shukri, and I would also like to thank Group 4 for a very, very interesting and fruitful discussion that taught us a lot. So I'll try to be very quick in my summary, starting from what exists when it comes to disaster climate risk management practices for resilient production. We got multiple examples, things like Uganda implementation of early warning and weather information systems available to farmers to support their planting. Things like water technology, developing water technologies to ensure sustainable production. We also heard about risk transfer mechanisms from Sri Lanka for crop and disaster insurance, which kind of are structured around multi-actor partnerships and building on pre-existing systems, but developing them further, ensuring that farmers have access to those systems and also to their inputs, making sure that they have reliable access to inputs, removing the long delays between damage and payout. So this really kind of innovative thinking on risk transfer. And we also got examples from Africa on promoting caisse de résilience approach based on the pillars of technical, financial, and social support that promotes a range of selected and curated good practices for certain target vulnerable communities, which kind of bring together climate change, agroecological principles. We also heard about trainings on environmental conservation, trainings on natural resource management, things like farmer-managed natural regeneration, energy-saving stoves, also training in disaster risk management for communities and helping them to build preparedness. So multiple examples from the field on that one. And as challenges, we heard, for example, the very fragile context of Somalia was raised, that has like very particular needs. So it's really a reminder that we're not, against the climate crisis, we are all vulnerable, but some are more vulnerable than others. So really this kind of idea that, in fragile situations, farmers need extra support for accessing seeds, for harvesting tools, and generally for inputs for farming. We also had a very important challenge mentioned, which was data, especially coming from that example of insurance scheme in Sri Lanka, but I think it applies at all levels, local, country, regional, global, is the access, this big data gap that we have on understanding the impacts of disasters, on risk, disaggregated data by sex, age, geography, etc. Something that would really allow us to cater our risk reduction and climate risk reduction actions. And it's still a very big gap on that one at all levels. We also heard other challenges when it comes to some mindset of communities, maybe thinking about risk in a very myopic sort of way, and also challenges when it comes to lacking capacities. And when it comes to opportunities here, we also discussed at large agroecology as a key approach to address both climate change adaptation and mitigation, but also disaster risk reduction, and similar agroecology and similar approaches which value natural resources and local knowledge are really key opportunities that should be put forward. We also talked about the importance of integrating humanitarian and development action, which are still divided. So there's much more to be done. We talked about the need to tackle the root causes of vulnerabilities and of hazards. A reminder that a lot of the hazards are still human-induced, and it's important to work on those root causes, and also not forgetting about that it's critical to really reduce inequalities as we think about resilience. So that's in summary our discussion of our group. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Mira. It's very rich. It's just we're almost running out of time. So thank you for that, really, Mira. You captured it nicely. Now I will give the floor to Julia. Please, Julia, go ahead.
I'll try to be brief. So it was very interesting to hear about the many practices that are already being implemented both at the farm level, at the community level, with the contribution of farmers' organizations, but also government and other stakeholders. For example, we hear about practices that farmers are already implementing, for example, agroeconomic practices, but also agroforestry that help with risk management. We also heard about some programs for response and adaptation that were implemented, for example, in Kenya to respond to COVID-19. Implemented by the farmers, also with the government. That was really important also for disseminating information about the COVID and how to react to make sure that information reach the level of the farmers. Also, a very important contribution regarding the need to involve small community groups and integrate climate smart agriculture and risk management in their plans, and also all the practices related to, for example, insurances on crops and market observatories. In terms of challenges, there was convergence on the need for actions to be more coordinated. And also the need to engage more farmers, but also the fragmentation of the sector, of the farming sector. So basically, it happens that each farmer has his own approach, its farmers' organizations has its own approach, and we would need to operate less in silos and more together. Participants also underline that sometimes this happens also among the other stakeholders. For example, we have silos among climate change makers and also other advocates, including on DRR. And these make also difficult to disseminate information and make sure that information reach the grassroots level. Also, it was underlined the need for education and training for farmers and communities on financing of risk management methods. The technology gap was also underlined. And also one other important challenge was that it is not always easy for farmers to understand that costs for prevention is not cost, but it's an investment for the longer term. And in terms of opportunity, it was underlined by participants that there is a need to recognize the role of the farmers, involve youth, and especially young farmers in the discussion, in the preparation and beyond the summit. Also boost the use of digital technology that we learned a lot about during the COVID-19 breakup. And also we need to integrate disaster risk management in the agricultural policies, because it can really help to increase market stability and also the farmers' income. And finally, we need to act together. So the importance of partnership was also underlined. Thank you, over Shukri.
Thank you very much, Julia. Really very important points. And I see also in the chat, really good points are being raised. We'll collect them all and report on them. Thank you very much. Please keep them coming and send to all. But last but not least, now I will give the floor to Sylvie.
Thank you, Shukri. Let me just look quickly at the notes. This group has been, you know, like you mentioned, it's been just amazing. I'm really thrilled, and thank you very much. We had a very rich discussion, many perspectives, and very much points from farmers, but also from FAO and the Fair Trade Association with Kerry. I mean, we had a wide range of perspectives that's been shared. I don't think I've managed to do justice to the breadth of the discussion. There's a lot of convergence with everything that's been mentioned already, but I would just like to add, in terms of practices, that there is really the organic farming that is seen very important to avoid pollution and contamination along the food value chain. The question of local seed adapted production, very important. The question of the value addition of the produce, which might be a little more expensive if they do respect some of the environmental criteria, and the need, you know, the need that, like in the fair trade, of bringing the consumer of the cost implication of a resilient sustainable product to take into account environment and climate challenges. From Jamaica, Tamisha also strengthened the importance of taking care of women who are producers and suffer the most from climate change impacts, and how they are really focusing on supporting their capacities and absorbing, but also managing risk, and really emphasizes that example. Also in terms of practices, the role of nature and natural ecosystems to really help in the risk management, very important. When it comes to challenges, of course, colleagues mentioned many challenges, and let me quickly voice again something that I mentioned with everyone, was the resource constraints. You know, there's a lot of talks, but not enough political will and financial flows to really go for these actions on managing multiple risks, especially from climate change. There is the question of the farmers that are avoiding taking risks, but even more now because of the increasing risk of failure. That was mentioned by our colleague Deborah, and that requires long-term accompanying measures and support. It's not just a quick fix to bring in innovation and support to farmers who want to innovate and take more risks. So the dimension of time was very important. Again, the question of the translation in terms of challenge from this policy global discussion, including Food System Summit, and the translation and the coherence with the local action. What does that mean at local level from farmers and for local action? There is a big disconnect there that was mentioned also by Walter. Quickly on opportunities, we have a lot of tools. Insurance was mentioned, and this needs to be really scaled up. This is helping to absorb shocks. That was really mentioned as a positive opportunity. The scaling up the consumer awareness that we're already seeing today on getting them involved and willing to take the cost that is needed to this transformation for investing in resilience food production. That is a very big opportunity, but there's some positive changes looking ahead. The multi-stakeholder processes and dialogues that we are seeing now involving farmers in the decision makings. Again, this is challenging, but it's a big opportunity. And finally, Kelly mentioned a point that was not mentioned by anyone so far, and it's very important, especially we've seen now in the North, that the promotion of human rights and environmental due diligence in the legislation today, that this is an opportunity for private sector to really be able to tackle more risk, at the source in the production. I will stop with that. We will do a full report on this very rich discussion. Thank you very much. Back to you, Shukri.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have to rush actually because of the interest of time. Very rich discussions. I'm really glad we have very interesting things to put together to report. Please send us all. I will not actually try to summarize what we have heard, but we have heard on what needs to be done, why is it need to be done, who should be involved, and how that go about it, and also the different intricacies were there, from definition to the specifics were discussed, and that's a very rich discussion that we will be happy to summarize and send to you all. So unfortunately, this is what we are is the end of the session. Before I close, I want to thank you all. I mean, you're still there actually with us even after this, and I want to thank the panelists, the facilitators, note takers, the organizing team, wonderful team, for all the support and the efforts to make this event happen. Finally, a big thank you to you all who have joined us today and shared your thoughts and ideas, very, very rich, one of them. And as promised, as you can see here are the messages, and you find something exciting and which you will take away for us to follow up. One final word, we will send you all the registered users a follow-up communication with related resources. You can also find further information on CORE, and this is the knowledge sharing platform on resilience, in the dedicated web page. You will see in the chat box. Use that. I think I would like to close with that. Thank you to everyone again, and have a good day wherever you are. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.